Welcome to the Gospel Addict Podcast. I'm Bryan.
And I'm Jim Reski.
We're gospel addicts because we believe the gospel of Jesus isn't just good news, it's the best news ever.
We're addicted to the gospel because it doesn't just start us out in the Christian life, it is the Christian life.
Join us as we look at the Bible through the lens of the gospel.
Thanks so much for listening.
This is another episode of the Gospel Addict Podcast. On tonight's episode, we are going to do what we like to call the AfterTalk. Recently, my co-host Jim Reski taught on the last part of the book of Deuteronomy. And Jim, just so you know, from my perspective, I thought you did an amazing job. It was great.
Thanks, Greg.
It was great.
That's so kind of you. Thanks.
But one of the things we say is, or at least I think I told you this, that when you give a presentation, there's always the talk you prepare, the talk you deliver, and then the talk you wish you would have delivered.
That's right.
And so sometimes the afternoon, right after we have both of us have taught our various things, you know, we just keep thinking about, I should have said this, or I forgot to say this, or we just think of ways to improve. But I'm thinking this is going to be a hard one to have much to say here. But
oh no,
oh no,
I've got like a dozen things.
You know,
it's funny. It's like you've taught me that phrase a long time ago, which I just so good that thing about the three talks. You always get three talks. And I've always thought of it like when if you give a talk and you kind of stumble or stammer your way through it, you're like, oh shoot, you kind of, you say things, we've all given talks like that. It's like that went badly. I didn't have it down. But I think there are times when you say, no, I kind of got through the talk okay, and the time management was okay, and the talk was coherent and it came out okay. Which I felt like this talk of Deuteronomy. So for our listeners on the podcast, listen to the previous podcast, it would have been the Deuteronomy podcast as delivered, the Deuteronomy Bible study as delivered in front of a live group of guys in the Bible study. I thought it was coherent. I delivered okay, but there's still about a dozen things that I thought, I left that out. And that, wish I had said that. So I'm so glad we have this after talk to cover, even a talk that is, you could deliver okay.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing when we're dealing with such large chunks of scripture.
Oh yeah.
The preparation, we over prepare.
Yeah.
And you have so much material, you have to cut it out in order to make the time frame. And then if you have people asking questions or sharing their comments or thoughts as you're delivering it, then that adds another factor. Okay, so where do you want to start, Jim?
Well, maybe we should start with the two letters, because that was kind of the heart of the thing. We didn't really go to do that at the pre-talk. So maybe it's good to just give a little context, because if people are listening to the podcast in sequence, they would have heard the pre-talk, and then in the talk I said, hey, there's this idea of writing two different letters. And I think I referenced it during the talk, but the people listening to the podcast should know that in sequence, the previous Bible study leader who spoke about this was saying, you should write a letter to your congressperson, and you should write them a letter about Christian standards on, and I think he said things like they were more like, our view on moral issues of the day, like the sexual purity issues,
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I was picking up on that, and that's why and probably listeners to my talk might have inferred that or gotten that idea that was in the previous talk, and I was responding to that by saying, that's fine, write that letter, I agree, but here's a second letter you really ought to write as well, so hopefully that was clear enough that people kind of got that gist, that I was referencing a previous speaker that they would not have heard on the podcast, but people in the room had heard the previous week. But part of that thinking, it was, was driven by some of what Keller had to say about the political parties. And I did leave that part out, and probably good to do that, because I don't want, we both say, I agree, don't want that a Bible study to be a political event. Really don't want the names of living politicians or political parties. It's just too easy to drift down that road. And And I don't want to go to church like that either. I want a church to be apolitical. I don't want to come to church and have them say, see, it's, talk about the news and tell
Hmm.
me who to vote for. And that's not why I'm there. And I want a group of a Bible study where people who are from dramatically different political persuasions can come together because they're both believers, they're both redeemed, and they can share different perspectives, hopefully calmly and civil in a civil way, but not let that be part of the Bible study itself and part of the or a church and worship service or anything. I like it to be apolitical.
Right.
Um, but
I
in the
agree.
letter writing thing, there was something that Keller wrote a while back saying, that, and this was kind of in the back of my mind thinking about that no one political party ever does this. No one political party ever has a strong emphasis on, sexual moral ethics, right? Like including things like abortion rights and the sexes between a man and a woman in a marriage relationship. That's considered traditional conservative values, but
Hmm.
also this incredible care for the poor and the powerless, and one of those tends to be conservative, the other one tends to be liberal. And his point was almost no political party marries it. And that's what I was thinking about when I said, wouldn't that have been an incredible witness to the nations if Israel pulled that off? If they had been the one that did marry it together.
Hmm.
Because no one does that. But when I was saying that and going through that, there was a passage in Proverbs 31 that I was going to read. I had my notes on the side. It's probably good that I didn't because that would have gone over time if I had. But it's a great passage, and maybe we should read it now. It's from Proverbs 31 because it really spoke to the idea of the letter number 2, the letter where you have a concern for the poor and powerless, and try to marry letter 1 and letter 2 together. So I don't know if you have that.
Yeah, I have it. Which verses?
Just read verse 1 through 9. Verse 1 through 9.
Okay. Okay. The words of King Lemuel, the oracle which his mother taught him. What, O my son, and what, O my son, O son of my womb, and what, O son of my vows?
Hey, stop there a second. I just want to
Yeah.
tell you, I love this passage because this just sounds like a mother talking to her son, right? And I would say I was going to have some fun with it if I had to use it during the study, to say, because it's in my mind, it reads like this: What, my son, and what, O son of my womb, and what, O son of my vows? Like, come
That's
on now, talk to me now. It's that kind of, with just three sentences starting with the word "what." Sounds like
yeah,
a mother talking to her child. What, my son, and what, O son of my womb, and what, O son of my vows. I don't know any other verses like that in the Bible. I've always loved that. So, but please
that's
continue.
good. Oh man, you just added a lot to it there.
it's,
Um,
it's fun.
do not give your strength to women or your ways to that which destroys kings. It is not for kings, O Lemuel. It is not for kings to drink wine, or for rulers to desire strong drink. For they will drink and forget what is decreed, and pervert the rights of the afflicted. Give strong drink to him who is perishing, and wine to him whose life is bitter. Let let him drink and forget his poverty, and remember his trouble no more.
Now
Open
stop
your
there a sec. Stop there
Okay.
a sec. Because this section here, this is a mother of the king giving him advice, right? And saying, you need to be on your guard against personal fleshly indulgence. And he starts right away with sexual purity. Do not give your strength to women or your ways to that which destroys kings. Do I need to say it out loud, son? She's
Mm,
like, she's clearly saying, don't. You're the kingly position. You could do what a lot of people in power do, which is use that power to just indulge your flesh and indulge your pleasures, but don't do that. And then a whole section on alcohol, right? So sexual proclivities and substance abuse. It says don't do that. Keep your nose clean living. And those are great conservative principles. We'd say, see, isn't that great advice? That was letter number 1.
right.
Right. Yeah. It's like, what? You got to stand up for this. And don't just because you're king, don't go down that road. And you got to live in the straight and narrow and, keep your nose clean. So that's great. And now read, continue. Verse 9.
Verse 9.
Oh,
Open
verse
your
8,
mouth.
8, 8, 8, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
yeah. Open your mouth for the mute, for the rights of all the unfortunate. Open your mouth, judge righteously, and defend the rights of the afflicted and the needy.
The poor and the powerless.
Yeah.
The poor and the powerless. So yeah, keep your nose clean. Letter number one. This sexual purity stuff is really important, and substance abuse. Don't do this. Don't use all your power to just indulge yourself, right? But you do need to use your power for defend the rights of the afflicted and needy.
Yeah.
Right. Open your mouth for the mute. The people you need to care about people that have no power, no ability to care for themselves, that can't do it. Right. So
Oh,
it's a great passage. I mean, I love that little what thing at the beginning, but
yeah.
this thing just ties together like what I was trying to do in the talk, letter 1 and 2, and puts it all together. So
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah. That's
yeah,
Proverbs 31 verses 1 to 9, if anybody wants to go back and look at that.
that's right. And then and so what I was trying to get across is this notion that you need to care about and have on your heart what's on God's heart. And I did that in the body of the letter itself, right? When I was saying, I as a Christian, I care about what God cares about. And so the point is, and then later in the talk saying, well, what can we learn from Deuteronomy? We're supposed to keep all these laws. Well, what you can learn is like, what's on God's heart? And
Right.
God does care about both things. He cares about, sexual purity and that moral law. But he also cares about caring for the rights of the poor and powerless, which again, no political party does. And then there was another story that I was going to lead right into that I didn't have time for. And again, it's probably good I didn't because it involves a political figure. She was not a someone who ran for office, but she's credited for starting the whole Social Security program. So that is, if you're getting a Social Security check, you have her to thank for it.
Wow.
And yeah, because she
Did you hear was she speaking somewhere or
no, she was a labor secretary under FDR,
okay.
and she was her name was Frances Perkins. And so we won't go into great detail on it now, but it's an incredible life story. And it ties into something that was very much part of my New York experience.
Yeah. Talk
And
about it.
well, so I'll tell it briefly, and people can look it up on Wikipedia and see her life. Frances, Frances, Frances Perkins. But she was labor secretary in FDR, kind of reluctantly. He kept saying, I need you in Washington with me. Because she had, he was governor of New York, and she had been his like secretary of, I don't know, some title like the secretary of labor, but a similar role, or secretary of industry or something like that, similar role in his administration. He was governor of New York. And she became what was known as his moral conscience. Like she was the little angel on his shoulder, like the moral conscience of FDR during the World War II. In his cabinet, she was the moral conscience. And she did things like she set up a social security system. So if you're getting a social security check or you're paying a social security looking forward to that check, you have her to thank. But her story really started with an event that happened in New York City that almost every New Yorker I know knows about, but not everybody outside of New York knows about it. And it's the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire. And that fire happened, I don't know the year. I can look it up. I should know the year. 19 would have been like around in the 20s, 1920s. But what happened was there was a building in New York City, because a lot now New York City is filled with skyscrapers and neighborhoods. But this was a like a 10, 12-story building that was a factory, and they were filled with women who were working on sewing clothes, and a fire broke out. And the owners of the factory had gotten a break from the commission when they built the building to have 2 fire escapes instead of 3. They had a third, instead of having 2 indoor fire escapes, they had one that was out on the outside.
Okay.
And they all,
This happened in 1911.
oh, thanst you.
Saturday, March 25th, 1911.
Yeah, there are some. I don't think a lot of people know about it, but like I said, there's some History Channel specials on it, and there's a lot you could read about it on Wikipedia and get the details. To make a long story short, it was awful. It was horrific, and it was like on the 9th, 10th, and 11th floor of this building. The owners had also locked the doors to the existing fire escapes because they wanted to search the belongings of the purses of the women as they were leaving work, because they were afraid they're going to steal something, and they also wanted to keep union organizers out. And so when the fire broke out, there's like clothing and stuff everywhere, so it just spread like wildfire. and the women were all just trapped. And so eventually, 146 women died, all between the ages of 18 and 24. And many of them jumped to their death, started jumping out of the building. And Frances Perkins was a socialite at the time, a wealthy New Yorker, was having tea with some other ladies, like not far from there, heard all the commotion, and went over to see what was happening and saw these women jumping to their death, hitting the sidewalk, and changed her life forever. And what she came out of that saying, and she's like, I'm, wealthy socialite. I can just spend my life having tea with my friends. She came out and said, I have an obligation to care for others.
Wow.
And that's why she got involved. And then she became an advocate for all these things. By the way, the story, the owners of that factory went to trial and they were exonerated. They said, no, you didn't break any laws. It's fine. And it created an outrage. And this is why it really shapes that's, like I said, a lot of New Yorkers know that story. And it shapes an idea of saying, capitalism is great, but it needs to be regulated. You can't have capitalism run amok and just abuse people like that. You have to have regulated capitalism. So that's kind of there's a whole part of that story that goes that way. Really not an avenue I would want to go down in our Bible study. It's more what happened to Frances Perkins, because she happened to be having tea nearby and came by, and her whole life was changed, and the trajectory of the United States was changed as a result, because Frances Perkins got involved and said, I need to care about other people. That's letter number two. Right? And so get on your heart what's on God's heart, because God says, look, these poor, the powerless. King Lemuel, listen, you need to care for the afflicted and needy.
Yeah.
So in our study, there was one guy who raised his hand. I think this is I don't think this was edited out. I think it'll be on the podcast if people listen to it. Who said maybe that letter needs to be to the churches. And we didn't dwell on that in the study. And I said, you're getting ahead of me. I'll get to that in a second. So I don't know if I ever came back to it. But I talked to him after the study. I thought that was an interesting comment, because some churches, you might think, and let's not name denominations, but maybe sort of mainline denominations that you might think are more liberal denominations. They say, what we need here is the social gospel. You don't need to go and proselytize and convert souls. You need to go feed people. You need to go, build homes and do that kind of thing. And who cares what people sleep with? It's none of your business. It doesn't matter. That kind of stuff is, old school. We don't care about that stuff and saving souls. We just want to help people physically meet their physical needs. It's a social gospel. And there are other more, we might call more conservative denominations, and we say that's ridiculous. We're here to save souls for Christ. So we're going to do evangelism. We're going to go to these countries and share the gospel, but really don't go in there and try to rebuild homes and feed people, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And not many do that well. Actually, when Keller talked about this, he said, it's just his view. He said one of the few organizations that does that really well is the Catholic Church, because they kind of hold firmly to sexual purity and abortion rights on the one hand, but also Catholic relief ministries. There's a lot of work around the world to help feed the poor and care about those things and do those things. So it's interesting. Keller mentioned that, and I think they tried to model Redeemer in New York off that, to both share the gospel, but also through different ministries. At the time, they called it Hope for New York. I don't know what they call it now, but really try to do some things, help the city as well. And you might have heard that. Remember that idea that what you want is your neighbors, even if they say, I don't know what they care or what they believe in that church, but if that church folded, we'd have to raise taxes in this town because they do so many good things, right?
Right. Oh yeah, yeah.
Right. And that's letter one and letter two. That's the blending. If you could be that kind of, again, no political party does that. Most denominations don't do that. But if you could be a church that married both, just like God wanted for the nation of Israel, what a witness that would be. So anyway, those are some of the things. So things in the letter one and letter two I wanted. There are a couple more thoughts we'll get to in a second, but those are some of the more important things I wanted to get out.
You talked about the face.
Oh yeah, the face towards the end. Yeah, we can hop around a little bit here in the after talk. There's a great verse for the face, and I was talking about that. And this notion that it was from a Keller sermon that I can't find on the face, and just how important the face is. Some of the thoughts I was saying about how a child of the king can walk up to the king. This was an old Keller sermon that talks about that. So I was getting those kind of thoughts from him. But There's a great verse for it that I should have quoted at the time, and it's right on point that I didn't think of. And I don't know if you have it ready, Greg.
Yeah, it's Psalm 27 verse 8. When you said when you said seek my face, my heart said to you, your face, O Lord, I shall seek.
Yeah, isn't that great? That's what God wants from us, right? What God wants is a people that desire the right things, that you get your loves in the right order, like Augustine said, and you
Yeah.
say, when you said, "Seek my face," my heart said, "Thy face, O Lord, I shall seek." It's what I want. Just want to be close to you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but it's a missed opportunity. Great verse.
You
So,
quoted a verse though, didn't you, during the talk?
yeah, well,
Remember?
I quoted there's two verses, a couple of places in Deuteronomy where he's saying, "I'm going to hide my face from you," and then a reference also to Exodus 33 when God says, I'm just gonna abandon you. You go ahead. I'll send my angel, give you all the blessings, but you're not going to get my face.
Mm, okay.
So yeah, I was doing Deuteronomy, but that verse in Psalm 27 was perfect. So,
Yeah.
um, okay, a couple other odds and ends. I just again from kind of couple New York experience stories that I didn't weave in, but thinking about them afterwards. I was talking about I was during the talk I talked about how in when I was in New York I thought I was going to New York I was the moral one, and at that point I was saying I thought I was and people would see from my moral behavior what upstanding was, and there's a story I gave about a woman who said you're not the moral one, you're the immoral one. I care about
Right.
the poor. What do you do with your life? I care about her. So she was the moral one. I was the immoral one. So I told that story, but there's a part of that that I often tell that I left out that um, there's a time sometimes in your Christian life, you're surprised when you come across someone who's more moral than you are and they put you to shame. And that story was a story just like that.
Mm-hmm.
And as a Christian, sometimes you think, wait a second, I'm the Christian, but this person's better than I am. I don't
Mm,
get, it's like a little, you know what I mean? It's like, I'm the one who lost my temper in that and they were very calm, or I'm the one who was selfish and they were very generous, or I'm the one who's, you know what I mean? Wait a second, I'm the Christian. They're not even a Christian. And you're flabbergasted by that sometimes. At least I used to be.
yeah.
Because you think, again, that's kind of that thinking that Christianity is a religion of moral progression. I mean, Christians are supposed to be morally better than the rest of the world, right? They're going to see by our moral behavior, and that's not the way to conceptualize it. We are redeemed sinners. So I think now I like, you know, I've had people that don't agree at all with my views on sexual morality, for example, in the workplace, we're better people than I was. They're just kind and generous
Mm,
and giving and hardworking. I thought these are guys, these are really great. And not that when I was a younger Christian, that shock and dismay, thinking I'm supposed to be the moral one. Like, no, that's that's what this podcast is all about. That's we're gospel addicts, right? It's not that we're eights trying to be nines out of 10, improve our moral performance and show good we are zero, 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 zero. We're 10 in God's eyes because of what he did, but we are zeros. So
amen.
anyway, and that so I kind of was doing that with that New York story I did tell, but part of it is this reflection now that I'm never surprised when I come across someone who's a better person than I am. I kind of expect it. It doesn't shock me at all, when they're a better
Mm.
person. Like,
And you feel like you learned that when you were living in New York City?
yeah, because you're around so many people that are so different than you
Yeah.
are, different backgrounds, different thoughts, not at all your kind of experience, different cultures, different parts of the world, and you see someone who's from a totally different part of the world, different religion, different background, and not like me who grew up going to Sunday school and singing hymns and memorizing the verses and singing Jesus loves me, this I know, since I was 3 or 4 years old. And you meet someone who's different religion, entirely different part of the world, and they're a great person. They like really care
Yeah.
about their kids. They care about they're moral. Like, wow, yeah, they are. They're not redeemed, and we're not redeemed because we're good. You
Mm,
know, we're God saved us while we were yet sinners. Romans 5:8.
yeah. Amen. Amen to that.
So that did bring up one other thing I want to get to on attribution, and then there was one thing. There's one point a comment. One of the commentators made a comment about the weights and measures. I thought it was great. They said that when the Jews were kicked out of Rome, remember that's I think it was Tim who said that that so much business dealings got to be unethical and dishonest because and so they wanted them back because they were the ethical, honest ones who were abiding by the law, the Mosaic law, on fair weights and measures. But
Oh,
because they were fair, do you remember that? It was a great little story. I never heard of it before, but this was incredible because they were the counterparty to transactions, right?
yeah,
So people could say, I don't trust you, you don't trust me, but if we go through them, they're going to have fair weights and measures. We can both trust them. And when
right,
they're gone,
right.
kicked out of Rome, now like we're all unethical and we're all cheating each other, and we need them back. I thought what a that's. And
Yeah, that
I'm
is
summarizing what I heard in class. I didn't go research it separately, but what a story. It was great.
right, right. That is a cool story. Um,
So my thought was because I was an investment banker in New York, and I think people think, oh, and I was a corporate lawyer, then investment banker. People think, well, that's all sleaze. You must have been doing. I remember my dad once, who didn't know much about what I was doing. He said, "So you're a lawyer, huh?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "You're not doing something crooked, are you?" I said, "No, Dad, no, I'm not." And I was just gonna laugh it off, but I thought that's the general view. If you're doing that kind of thing, you must be doing something crooked, right?
wow.
Is something sleazy. And the reality was, most everyone I've known in that world was incredibly ethical because the minute took advantage of a client or did something ethical, you just killed it forever. It's just whatever community you're in, it's a small community. Everybody knows everybody. When I was
Mm,
doing like bank mergers and acquisitions, everybody knows everybody in that little world. And if you're the dishonest person that no one can trust, forget you. No,
yeah.
you're burning your bridges forever. So everyone is.
Did you see that happen? Did you see
I,
guys that
I saw very little dishonesty. I saw people that uh, lost their cool. That
were difficult to work with or
very right, difficult, and they thought they were being advocates to their clients, and I always thought that was stupid because, that old phrase, you attract more bees with honey than you do with vinegar. You
Mhm.
know, I had people opposed to me, like banging the table, screaming, and like, yeah, you're not doing anything good for your client doing that.
Mhm.
But very little outright dishonesty, cheating, stealing, because it gets around, and then no one wants to do business with you anymore. So, and even I mean, a study for the CFA, Charter Financial Analyst. A big part of the curriculum is ethics, and it's like dealing with insider trading and things because nothing's worth it. Nothing's worth it. You do far better in that world by being honest long term than you do by any short term gain, which is just kind of the
I
opposite of what people think. And
I think
so,
yeah, I think that is very surprising to hear because I do
yeah,
think people think the opposite.
right. I think so. So, and look, it's fine to do this on an after talk in a podcast. We can talk about it. Maybe not worth it doing it during the Bible study. Spend the
Right.
time. It sounds like you're being defensive about your industry and being self defensive, or whatever phrase I'm looking for, just being defensive. So, but that's been my experience. Like very little outright. And there are times people they say things like, well, maybe they were hiding things. People, if it inches close to that, like you're being a little shady, then people remember talking about it. They don't, so everyone's really doesn't want to get close to that. Like, nope, everything above board, truthful, honest, ethical, disclosed.
Hmm.
Anyway, so um,
Well, anything else you wish you would have said during the talk that you didn't say?
yeah. Well, one or two things. I saw feedback from someone afterwards because there's a part of the talk I was talking about attribution. Remember that was towards the end. It was one of the applications, and the idea that if um, if bad things happen, you're gonna it's your fault. This is what these first in Deuteronomy, but you won't think that it is. And if good things happen, you'll attribute to yourself. You say it's because I'm righteous and good. And God is saying, if good things happen to you, it's not because you're good, but you're going to think it is. And I talked to someone afterwards who deals with like people that struggle with like substance abuse. He said, "What about someone who is, so if I'm saying first of all, bad things happen to you, it's your fault. What about someone who is molested as a child?
Right.
Like, oh yeah, that's not what I meant.
Yeah, yeah.
That's not what I meant, right? I think there was a message God was saying to Israel. It's like, you're going to go astray. You're going to say, I abandoned you. It's not because I abandoned you. It's because of your sin. So God had a clear message in Deuteronomy about that.
Right.
But when I was kind of summarizing that, I mean, I didn't want the takeaway to be, hey, if bad things happen to you, it's always something you did. So you're a rape victim. Hey, it's your fault. Like, no, 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 no. That's
Yeah.
not at all what it. And the person who pointed out to me said they said that it was kind because they said actually in the letter two part where you're talking about, hey, it's your obligation to take care of the fatherless,
Yeah.
the widows. These are people that are suffering through no fault of their own. You're an orphan,
Hmm.
right? You're a widow. It's not your fault. You have the obligation to care for them. So it's kind of it is, you don't stand there and say, well, it's your fault that you're an orphan or a widow. It's your fault that you're in the circumstances you're in. You don't. You say, hey, I'm going to care for you. I'm going to care for you. And there's a part of that that came up in the sheaves illustration because that rule in Deuteronomy where you leave part of your field
Yeah.
and the parallel verse in
You don't
Leviticus.
harvest, you don't harvest all your grapes. You leave some for,
Yeah,
you leave the edges, leave the edges. So for the poor.
right. That verse is in Leviticus, and the verse in Deuteronomy says if you drop something, just leave it there. Don't pick it up. Just leave
Mm,
the excess. And that the application for people that are poor to say, hey, you come and work for it. You do a little work for it as well. And I think I mentioned this in the talk, but you also in Deuteronomy you tithe for those people, and then every 3 years you do a special tithe. So it's one hand people work for it, they should be working for it, right? But even if they don't, even if they're completely irresponsible, so you say you don't sit there and say, well, and then bring that attribution part at the end. I say, well, it's your own fault. It's your own fault that you're in this mess. I don't have to help you because you did this yourself. Look at you. If you have, like, say, your substance abuse or something,
mhm.
you did all yourself. No, you still help them. You still help me. You still help them financially. You still help them. And the stories that it tells, like my brother-in-law is in social work, and sometimes I talk to him, what's that like? And would they deal with that population his whole life, dealing with people that are homeless and help them get back on their feet. He says, you know what, they're just a lot of times they're just hopelessly irresponsible. And we come up with a life plan and how you're gonna get on your feet and stop drinking and get a job. And then 2 weeks later they're back.
Hmm.
And what he do is says, I care for them. So it's very, very it's great spiritually. I think it's like I know they're not responsible. They're not doing the right thing. I wrote a plan for their life, and they just threw it in the trash and started drinking again. And I still love them, and I still care for them anyway, and I'll help them again. And I don't. And there's a way in your mind to say, "Oh, they're the noble poor. They're through no fault of their own, and that's why now I can help them." And he's not foolish that way. He's like, they're there are definitely people like that. The noble poor,
Yeah.
no fault of their own, homeless. He's like, I'm talking about someone who's through the fault of their own.
Hmm.
And I still feel the Christian obligation to help them. That's what I'm giving my life to. So I was very
Oh, that's
impressed by that line.
powerful. That's powerful. Well, hey Jim, how about if we wrap this up by thinking of this question, like how did you really see the gospel in Deuteronomy?
Oh, that's try. I was trying to get that at the end. Jesus, Jesus takes the curses so that we get the blessings. Oh, and I'm glad you mentioned it, Greg, because again, that's something that Keller talked about. And he talked about a moment when he and Kathy Keller were in a seminary class together and heard the seminary professor say that exact phrase. And they walked out of that class and they looked at each other and said, I think I finally understand what the gospel is.
Hmm.
It was from that notion, Jesus takes the curses so that I could get the blessings.
Yeah.
So, yeah, yes, just so powerful.
Yeah, so give people the context in Deuteronomy, like the whole Mount Ebal, Mount Gerizim, the blessings and curses. Um,
Yeah, just to kind of recap, if you didn't hear the previous podcast of the message, I mean, so God had a whole ceremony set up with them. They're supposed to go divide the tribes on 2 mountains, and he said, I'm gonna set up an altar and write the entire law on the altar itself."
yeah.
And so you see the law, and so you see all that, and then put that altar on the. So I'm going to talk about all
Which
the
mountain
good.
do you put that on? You put that on the blessing one?
No, they put on the cursed
They
one.
put it on the cursed one.
They
What
put
do you
on.
think the point of that is?
You're going to need a substitute. You're never. At the moment I'm giving you the law. At the moment I'm telling you, there's a choice you got to make. At the moment I'm telling you, here's the law. Do it. And you can do it. You should. I know you're not. You are going to need a substitute, someone who takes the curses for you.
Yeah. So was that the big um was that the big takeaway for you, like that really what hit you?
What hit me
Yeah.
was when I knew that part about the Keller sermon, the Keller story, and the part about uh, I think I got that from a different source. Might have been some of the commentaries about how the altar was built on the cursed mountain, not the blessed mountain, and the idea even then that they, as they're getting the law, they need the notion that you need a substitute right now.
So it's like if the altar was built on the blessing mountain, that would almost say it's achievable, right? Like, hey, you can,
Right,
follow this law and you'll get all these blessings.
right.
Uh,
Somehow this is the roadmap that'll show you.
yeah.
That idea that these are bricks you can use to build to close the chasm between you and God. Now, the big moment for me really was those verses at the end, mostly from Deuteronomy 28. I mean, I knew the notion that Jesus takes the curses so that we can receive the blessings from that Keller sermon, but reading the curses through Jesus's eyes,
Yeah.
as he would have read them as a child growing up and would have memorized these, knowing, and that this is, I did not say this phrase, Greg, and I'm glad to have the chance to say it, this notion that the Bible's not about you. The Bible's not about you. You read this and say, "Oh, so what am I gotta do all this stuff so I get blessings." If I got the message, I'll do I'll do it all. I'll be a letter one and letter two. I'll do it all, and I'll get blessings. And like the Bible's not about you. It's all about Him. It's all about Him and how that. So that part I didn't get from a Keller sermon. I was just reading and thinking, "Wow, how would Jesus read this when he reads like, the Lord will give you a trembling heart and failing eyes and a languishing soul." It's like, I know I will. It's about me. I'm going to the cross. Your life shall hang. This is Deuteronomy 28:66. Your life shall hang in doubt before you night and day. You shall be in dread and have no assurance of your life. And Jesus kind of solemnly nodding, right?
Mm.
That's me. These curses, they earned them, but I'm going to take them. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Gospel Addict Podcast. Feel free to contact us via email at gospeladdictpodcast@gmail.com.
Stay tuned for our next episode, and remember, on your worst days, you're never beyond the reach of God's grace, and on your best days, you're never beyond the need of God's grace.
See you next time.